Welcome back to Cultivated Conversations. I'm your host, Jen Proctor. If you've ever wondered where the money really is in the entertainment industry or where it might be going, well, today's episode is for you. Today's guest is someone who's been a friend of mine and I've had the pleasure of working with on several projects over the years. And I'm excited for you to get an exclusive look at what he does as COO of Mythical Entertainment. We're going to chat all things YouTube, monetization, and we get into the crossover between traditional and new media. I promise after today's episode, you're going to walk away with so much new knowledge. So please welcome Jacob Moncrief. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's rock and roll. Okay, so introduce yourself, and then I'd love for you to share. I always love for the guests to kind of talk about how we know each other.
Yeah, so I'm Jacob Moncrief. I'm the COO at Mythical Entertainment. We met a few years ago when I was at Westbrook as the GM, overseeing branded and unscripted over there. And we worked on a few projects. Snapchat, we did Charlie vs. Dixie.
Yep.
We did Meg the Stallion Show, which was really fun.
Yep.
And then we did 2 Meta VR projects together.
Spectacular.
Yes, the New Year's special. Went to Atlanta for a bit.
Yep.
And then we realized we grew up in the same town, streets away from each other, and
literally streets away from each other.
Babysat my brother-in-law, my sister's husband.
I did.
Which is very small world.
I know, such a small world. When you find someone that grew up in your small, teeny, tiny little hometown, you're like, all right, you're in.
Yeah.
We're cool.
Yeah.
Yep, forever and always. So talk to us a little bit about Mythical. So for folks who don't know, what is Mythical?
Yeah, so Mythical Entertainment is founded by Rhett and Link like 15 years ago at this point. They've been friends for 40 years. They just celebrated their 40th friendship anniversary.
40 years?
They met on the first day of first grade in Buies Creek, North Carolina. They got held back from recess for writing profanity on their desk. And they had a color mythical beasts. So that's where the name comes from.
I love it.
I've worked with them since 2017. I was with them for 4.5 years before Westbrook, and then I've been back for a year and a half. But we do a lot of digital content. YouTube first is really the model. Started with a channel called the Rhett and Link channel, which is we still post content to today. But our main driver is Good Mythical Morning, which is a daily show, the most watched daily show on the internet. Airs Monday through Friday. And then we have a channel called Good Mythical More. We have a channel called Mythical Kitchen that's led by Mythical Chef Josh. And then a bunch of different businesses that have kind of stemmed off from there.
And you were the COO. So tell us a little bit about, like, what does a day look like for you, and what are all the assets and pieces of the company that you oversee? Yeah,
so my role, I oversee all of content production and post. So we put out about 9 hours of original content a week. So it is a machine. So a lot of my time is spent maintaining the machine. Oversee all operations, so facilities, IT, everything that comes with that. People and culture, so all of our HR. We've got a little over 100 employees at our studio in Burbank. And then brand partnerships. So the past year, we've been focusing on building a sales team internally to do brand integrations. And then all of our production finance, business affairs, production legal, and then along with our president, oversee all of our finance.
Dang.
So a little bit. A little bit of things.
Just a couple of things.
Just a couple of things. Have an awesome team. I would say time-wise, a lot of meetings every day, as you know well.
Yeah.
But I would say about a quarter of my time is spent supporting my core group of direct reports that are awesome, that kind of each lead each of those things I just mentioned. A quarter of my time on the project of the moment. So like right now, a lot of like Brandcast prep, Cannes, VidCon, FYC prep, all those kinds of things. And then the rest of the time really on like strategy and growth and all those things.
Wow. I mean, there's many things about you that impress me, but I think you've accomplished so much in such a short amount of time, right? And so in looking back, because you mentioned like being at Mythical and then at Westbrook, and are there certain moments that you feel like were big shifts for you and really kind of were the pieces that got you to that next step in your career?
Yeah, I started at MTV in the scripted production department with like production executives overseeing a bunch of shows when MTV was launching all their big scripted series.
Yep.
So after some time, I was like, I really want to be on the ground of some shows. I got put on an awesome show called Sweet Vicious. It's an hour-long scripted show that's shot here in LA. After a season on the show and a season in a production office and like working 12, 14 hour-long days, I was like, wow, the growth path in production and production office in traditional is slow. Like, you can be lucky enough to get on an amazing show like Modern Family. No one's going to leave that show for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So unless you're jumping around from show to show, constantly kind of like finding your next gig, it can be hard to find growth. And the hours are long, they're tough. At the same time, BuzzFeed was really kind of launching their LA operation. So jumped over to BuzzFeed to help kind of build out the LA side, started producing for the Try Guys and like all those big digital faces at BuzzFeed at the time. So that was really, I think, a change in my trajectory. I mean, at the time, you know, when I went to film school, no one was thinking about digital or YouTube really. Yeah. And then just a few years into the industry, it was really kind of taking off, and there was an opportunity to go there, take some of the lessons I had learned thus far in traditional and apply it to a very fast-paced environment that didn't have a lot of structure. It was very much the Wild West in 2016, 2017 of digital. Yeah. And anyone that could kind of just like make a spreadsheet and keep things on time and on budget, there was a lot of opportunity for. So that was, I think, the real, like a big change moment for me. I think the other one was going to Westbrook. Like I spent 4.5 years at Mythical, probably started when we had about 20 employees, helped scale. We went through an acquisition of Smosh, helped building those brands and those production ecosystems, and then going to Westbrook, which kind of balanced between the two a little bit more, right? We did a little traditional, we did a little digital, really started to do more of the brand stuff and be able to work on much larger budgets, which was a really great challenge, and I enjoyed that. And then being back in Mythical now, it's kind of a great combo of all the above, right? Get to touch a little bit of everything, bring that larger budget experience, bring the brand partnership experience, and also work with a team that I have a lot of love for and very proud of building earlier on in my career. Yeah. So being back is fun.
And is there a time that you knew, as you were shifting, because you're like someone who could build a spreadsheet, right, and keep things together, but like you also mentioned you went to film school. So was your dream as a kid like to be this creative person? Did you ever think that you would end up more on this sort of operations side of things?
I always liked the production elements. Like in junior high, we had like a news show, and that was kind of like my entrance into it. Like we did a morning news show. I've always loved daily programming. High school worked on the news show, right? Like that was kind of like whatever the version of the AV club was at all those places. But I was always more drawn to the logistical side of things. My parents always say I've had a clipboard in my hand from a young age. So just, I've always leaned in production. When I went to film school, I went to Chapman, got a creative producing degree. I always focused more on the production side there. I thought for a long time I wanted to be a first AD. Did a lot of freelance first AD work throughout college. Realized that I'd probably have a heart attack at 40. I don't think my anxiety could stomach being a first AD. So I shifted to, I was like, okay, maybe more of a production executive, line producer. I really enjoyed being on the ground, but I also enjoyed being a little bit more upstream and making sure, projects were set up for success before they were greenlit. So that's kind of been my path on operationally. It's just kind of been like, oh, if we could make sense of things a little bit earlier in the process, then by the time we get to the shoots, things maybe will be around.
Yeah. It's fascinating because I feel like you're so, you really are so well-rounded, and just like in the work that we've done, right, it's like you're able to flex the creative muscles and understand how all those elements work, but then see the bigger picture operationally. What would be a piece of advice that you would give to someone, either starting out in their career, or maybe they're at a point where they've just hit a wall, or in this industry of ours, they're like, oh, fuck.
Oh man, I think in terms of like the collaboration with creative, like I enjoy producing on the logistical side. I think the way I've always viewed the collaboration is like, my job is not to say no. My job is to say like, this is what's possible with the budget and the timeline we have. So like maybe we can't have 2 elephants on set, but maybe we can have a zebra, right? Like an actual conversation. I dealt with one. So like, that's kind of always been like my view of the collaboration. I think for people that are starting out in their career and like entering the business or getting into digital, like it is very much that, right? This is a people business more than anything, and you have to know how to communicate. And when you're working with creatives and big feelings and big visions, it can be challenging. And if you come in and just like steamroll people, you're not gonna get the results you want. So if you can kind of find that balance of like understanding the vision, understanding the creative POV, and then trying to mesh that with the budget and business side, being mindful of things like ROI, and like at the end of the day, like things have to make money. that's where I've kind of found my sweet spot. And I think the thing that keeps me sane and enjoying collaboration still with creatives.
Yeah. And it's such a great piece of advice that you just gave, just about being a people person. I always say there's no time for assholes, right?
No.
I have no room for assholes. And I think even just looking back on my career 15 years ago, let's say, the way that people treated everyone, and we have come a really long way, which I think is really refreshing, right? It's like our generation of people are now becoming the leaders, and I think it's a much different industry to get into, but it's also a very challenging time to get into it. So I want to talk a little bit about traditional media versus new media, and all of this is evolving. I mean, it's going to be different next week than it is today, right? But I think you've had a front row seat on this sort of collision between traditional and new media. So what are some of the things that you've seen change the most in the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last few years, we've really seen traditional media see the value of YouTube and digital more. I think there's always been an interest in the space, and there's been investments over time, right? And some have panned out, some haven't. We've come a long way since like the MCN model of the digital ecosystem. But I think what we're seeing now is this realization that like creators have massive fandoms, right? The creators are the IP. They have these shows, and there's a way to work with them to do what they're already doing, but on a larger scale, versus, hey, taking a digital creator and plopping them into a very traditional
format.
It doesn't work, right? I think we've seen it not work, and we've seen traditional buck up against the model and creators buck up against the model. But I think we're now seeing traditional be like, okay, if that creator has this IP that they love and their audience is engaged and will follow them off platform and transact in different ways, there's an opportunity to do things that are similar but bigger on traditional, right? Because that is still one of the big differences is the budgets, right? Yeah. And traditional, often you are able to tell bigger stories. So if there is a reason to do that for a creator and their audience can see that, and it's not just a money grab, but it's like, wow, the thing you're doing at home that is very direct to camera, you can do something similar in a much larger way. They're going to be excited, and they're going to follow the audience that way. So I think that's what I've seen change the most over the last few years. Mr. Beast did Mr. Beast games on Amazon, right? So that's blowing up his show. Sidemen, a group out of the UK, just did something for Netflix. So I think we're seeing it. I think we're seeing it more on the live programming side too, of capitalizing on these live moments. But I sense and I hear a lot more of those things like coming down the pipeline as creators kind of get identified as ways to engage new audiences.
In 15, 20 of the last 50 calls that I've had, say, in the last 6 months, of these production companies that 9 out of 10 times are always traditional, every single one of them said, well, we're shifting more into YouTube, and it was the first time I'd really heard it as a theme. And I think it's because everyone is in a state of panic on the traditional side. 2021, 2022, I mean, it was just like booming. And, you and I, even in 1 year, I think we did like 4 projects together. If you were still at Westbrook, right, and doing that, like, I don't know what that would look like. It's so different. So it's really fascinating. And I've always talked a little bit about like you have this traditional talent, right? And then you have this digital talent. And correct, for a while there, they were trying to like mend the two. And I think everyone's sort of coming to the realization that like it's kind of splitting back off into its own lanes. I don't know. It's a very fascinating time. What do you think that the traditional studios misunderstand about digital?
I think there's a difference between an influencer and a creator. I think when you're thinking about long form video and YouTube in particular, I think the content is different, the creative is different, the way the audience engages is way different. I mean, we are making television at Mythical, right? Over 50% of our viewership comes from people viewing on the TV now, in the living room experience, right? Last year, we made the change to 4K, right? Because we're like, people are watching this in the living room, right? They want that televisual experience. And I think sometimes it's viewed still as just, influencer personalities, and I think it is sometimes the fandom and the audience that engages may be overlooked. And I think the other thing on the traditional side is like there has to be a reason for a creator to do something on the traditional side. It can't just be money, because sometimes the money isn't actually better than doing something on YouTube. When you have the opportunity to monetize it yourself, put in brands yourself, own the IP yourself.
Own all the creative decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think traditional has to keep that in mind when they are merging the two. It's not about a creator not doing something on YouTube anymore and instead doing something on a traditional platform. It's how do you do both, right?
Yeah.
How do both things become co-promotional? Because most creators at this point, they don't necessarily need traditional. It would have to be a reason to do it.
I want to go back to a point you just said about there's a difference between influencer and creator, right? And can you break that down a little bit for us from your POV?
It's not a ding on influencer. I think it has a lot to do in the way in which those two groups are creating content.
Yeah.
I think influencers are thinking a lot more about shorter form, more consistent throughout the day, more day in the life stuff, content that is a little bit more snackable, right?
Yeah.
Then creators, when I'm thinking of creators, I'm thinking of YouTube creators, right?
Yeah,
I'm thinking
formats.
of long form formats, IP that they are creating, right? Just like, traditional unscripted, right? It's how just creating these formats and repeating them.
And where do you think the biggest opportunities are, for careers, but just in general, right? Financially, over the course of the next 5 to 10 years?
The benefit that a lot of creators have on YouTube is they have access to very quick feedback, right? They are going to know if something's working very quickly. They don't have to go and film 10 episodes of a show in Ireland, right, to get the results that they want. They can test the format immediately.
You can do a pilot in your living room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can see what the feedback is. They can optimize it. We're in this constant circle of, revolving door of optimization. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to use that, right? These studios have so much IP that hasn't been touched in so long. There's no reason you need to think about bringing a show, a game show back from the 70s for 22 episodes, 10 episodes even, right? You can do one of them, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that, to test things out, see what works, do quick turns. I think there's a lot of opportunities for traditional celebs to get on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think there are lower budget ideas that are executable on YouTube, it's a great opportunity, I think, for traditional celebs to try out formats, right? Yeah. Again, it's not the only option to do a game show isn't broadcast. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. And then on the branded side too, I think brands are evolving beyond just, integrated reads and want to be doing more original branded content, which I think is a little bit of a buzzword right now,
It is.
Branded entertainment. But I think, leaning in with creators that already have engaged audiences and finding a reason to integrate with them. Audiences are really excited about it. We recently did a social video with Burger King, and the comments were so overwhelmingly positive. The audience is just excited. We are so excited because we love this brand, and we know Rhett and Link love this brand.
Yeah.
And we're just excited to see you guys be a part of their new menu launch, right?
Yeah.
So I think if it's the right brand with the right creators, audiences will really engage.
Yeah, well, and another word that's so buzzy and trite right now is authenticity, right? It has to be authentic. But that's an example of something that is so authentic and why it works.
Yeah.
So, anyone who has a synonym for authenticity, let us know. So let's talk a little bit about YouTube and building it and monetizing it. I hear that a lot. And so I'd love for you to just sort of, in layman's terms, break it down. Like if someone wants to launch a YouTube channel, right, what should they focus on first?
Yeah, I think the joy of YouTube is there's no barrier to entry, right? Anyone can create a YouTube channel and immediately start posting content. It doesn't mean it's going to be monetized from the first moment. You have to reach a threshold to be a part of the YouTube Partner Program, which then you have the opportunity to monetize your content.
And what is that threshold? Do you know?
On the subscriber front, it's somewhere between 500 to 1,000, and then there's a view threshold, and there's also a shorts threshold for shorts creators in order to get into the partner program, and then you can start to monetize. So once you reach that threshold and you're posting consistently, you get to monetize your content as a part of AdSense, which is the pre-rolls, the mid-rolls that you see when you're watching YouTube any time of the day. So that there's a partner share of that. So that is kind of the just by putting up your content on YouTube and being part of that program, you can monetize.
And is that an automatic thing? Like someone who puts this stuff up on their YouTube, they just say, I want to monetize. Once
you're part of the YouTube Partner Program, you're in it. So as long as you're being consistent and the channel doesn't go dormant, you are monetizing. It is YouTube has truly the best monetization opportunity for creators out there. It's incredible. As long as you're consistent, you continue to monetize. You can continue to monetize your library forever if it's continuing to get views. So that's kind of the baseline entry point on YouTube, right? That will just happen through Google's incredible sales team. And then from there, you can do brand integrations. So we do a lot of integrations into our content that are 60 second to 2 minutes, a lot of DR, DTC brands that are focused on conversion. And then we'll do just general like awareness campaigns with larger brands as well.
Yep. Full
Branded original content, which we don't do a ton of, right? But if you're creating an original series for the brand and launching it, those are really the main ways to monetize on YouTube. And then from there, we've spun off other businesses, e-commerce, et cetera, that are being promoted across all the long form content.
And as someone who has been on the developing and selling side, right, for so many years, and currently are overseeing that, what would you say, like, are there any sectors or lanes that there seems to be an appetite for in the YouTube space? Is it talk shows? Is it, I don't know, game shows, like you mentioned? Like,
that's a good question. I think we're still seeing a lot of variety. We have this belief that, like, the traditional cable and broadcast categories are going to be recreated on YouTube, right? You're going to have your HGTV home DIY. You're going to have your late night, right? That is our comparable for Good Mythical Morning. You're going to have your Food Network comparables. You're going to have your true crime doc comparable, right? And you look and you see creators in each of those verticals on YouTube. So I think there really is an appetite for connection. I mean, that's ultimately like the starting point for a lot of YouTube content is people want to feel a connection with you as a creator. That's why you'll see a lot of YouTube creators have their camera a lot closer than you would maybe find, on a late night show on a broadcast network, right? The camera, when you look at Good Mythical Morning, the camera's right there, right? Like right in Rhett and Link's faces. It's intentional, right? You want to like bring people in as much as possible. But I don't know if there's any particular vertical we're seeing pop off more than others right now. But I think there's just so much opportunity and like niche audiences to capture.
Totally. Okay, I want to play a little game of rapid fire.
Okay.
And I feel like you've been throwing out some of these words already.
Okay.
But it's really just, a one-liner in layman's terms.
Great.
Well, the first one is monetization, but I feel like you just spoke to that.
Yeah, I mean, monetization, running ads on your content.
Okay.
Right? The same way broadcast and cable have created their business for years.
Okay. Brand partnership.
Integrating a brand organically into your content.
Optimization.
Increasing the potential for audience reach and engagement.
Breakage.
Breakage in the budget sense is when you're going over budget. Is that what you're meaning? Okay.
I feel like it's a word that I hear.
Lots of breakage. Less right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Organic growth.
Non-paid growth. So no paid acquisition, not like boosting your content, just basically being caught by the algorithm and benefiting from that over time by growing your audience.
White labeling.
Creating content for other brands. Often times meaning. So if we create something for a brand account and then they may run it as a paid asset.
All right. Killed it.
Being tested.
so articulate. Okay, so as someone who works with budgets, I mean, huge budgets, probably some smaller budgets, I want to kind of dig into a little bit about how budgets work in the industry, right? Is there like one thing on every budget for every production that is like the biggest line item or the biggest spend?
Mythical is an interesting beast because Rhett and Link own the company, right? There is no network. No one is greenlighting our shows. We're deciding what we want to do and how many episodes we want to do and how long we want to do it for.
Sounds amazing.
It's great. It's wonderful. We have all the freedom. There's no production company fee baked in, right? Majority, 90% of our team is full time, so our freelance spend is very minimal. Our budgets are mostly like hard costs, like props and set design purchases, culinary purchases, lunches for crew. Those are really our budgets. So our budgets are a little different at Mythical. I would say outside of Mythical, I would say the largest expenditures are often related to cast and then locations. So whether that location is a travel location or a location you're building out or a location you're renting, in my experience, those have tend to be the two like largest single expenditures.
Traditional budgets, right, versus the YouTube budgets. Like, what are some of those differentiations?
When you're looking at traditional budgets, obviously there's sometimes several layers of studios, production companies, networks involved, right? And everyone has to have a piece of the pie, and there's often multiple IP owners involved, which just complicates budgets before you even, open a production office, right?
Yeah.
There's so many pieces to be cut in. In general, budgets for traditional tend to be larger. The reach is often larger, right? Theatrical releases have a much different economics, and the way in which you recoup dollars are way different than on YouTube. When we're thinking about YouTube budgets, we're looking at how can we monetize, back to monetization, right?
Yeah.
How can we monetize the content? What does monetization look like for 7, 30, 60 days, similar to how a broadcast network would look at it, right?
Yep.
And then we're obviously looking at library monetization, right? We have thousands of videos in our library that will continue to monetize forever. So when we're looking at budgets, we're balancing those things, right? Yeah. Obviously, you want to get to ROI as quick as possible, but they're, from a studio term, we're technically deficit financing, right? We don't monetization is not guaranteed, but we are using our years of data to kind of come up with what cost makes sense for potential monetization.
So cool and fascinating. Are you, I'm sure you are well read up on the conversations that are happening right now around the tax incentive? Like, I'm just curious what your POV is on that. Because, we've seen one of the projects we did, right? Yeah. It was clearly cheaper to fly the whole crew to Atlanta and film there than it was to film in LA. And that's like mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I think it was Rob Lowe talking about shooting in Ireland, right? Like he's shooting a new unscripted show in Ireland. Like, our budgets don't qualify for like the California tax credit, and I don't know if our budgets would qualify anywhere else for a tax credit. It also, we want to be here. We shoot everything in our own studio. All of our stages are pre-built and existing, and we flip on lights and turn on cameras and start rolling. But I think tax credits, I'm interested to see what happens in California, right? Yeah. There was just the letter that was signed by 100,000 industry folks to hopefully improve what's possible here. I think we have so many stages, and everyone obviously lives here, and no one wants to uproot. But tax credits are a part of it, right? And you have a lot of these areas that are creating the incentive to get people to come. Atlanta's obviously a big hub. They're also, it's a long process. Like, I think for that particular show that we worked on, I don't know if the production company's even seen the tax credit back, right? Because you got to get the credit, you have to sell the credit. It's a long road. It's worth it when you're thinking about a studio that's doing, hundreds of productions at once. Yeah. But it's not something we work with a lot.
Yeah. I'm just curious to see, where things are going to go in the coming years, because it really, it's been a strange few years. And I think there's so many really talented people that are out of work, and you just hear, oh, this production's filming elsewhere and elsewhere and elsewhere. It's, I don't know, wild times. I think you're in a good safe spot.
We love our studio in Burbank. We're not going anywhere. We've built it out for the last several years, and we love where we're at.
Yeah. And anyone looking to get into the business, go the YouTube route for sure. Looking back on your career, is there one thing that you wish you could have told your younger self?
I think, this is, a lot of people would probably relate to this, but just the idea of it's going to work out, right? Which is hard to think about in the moment when you're going from freelance job to freelance job, but I think you will end up with the people that you're supposed to be working with. I think it's the last few years for me have really been a career high in terms of, coming back to Mythical and the work we did at Westbrook and getting to meet folks like you that I know I'm going to work with for the rest of my career has been really exciting. And I think it does eventually fall into place, but it takes time. This as fast moving as this industry is, it is not always as fast moving, I think, for everyone individually, and just a little bit of patience. I'm not a generally patient individual, but I would tell myself be a little bit more patient.
Yeah, it is. Well, in the moment, it's hard to be patient.
Yeah.
And then now that we're older and wiser, we can look back and say it, right? Is there one project or one moment that you just is that golden nugget? It's that thing when someone asks you what's been the coolest thing you've worked on? It's always the first thing you say?
I mean, I love the VR stuff we did because I'd never done it before. I think it's hard. It's not often, I think, when you're working on projects where you're like, I've actually never done this before, right?
Yeah.
And that was that.
Yeah.
Those two projects that Westbrook did in VR were new. The tech was new. The storytelling was new.
Jacob and I were sitting like backstage with Oculuses on, literally watching
what was happening in front of us.
Be like and performances and like it just and it was wild, and you're moving your head, and
we had some incredible talent on that.
We did.
I mean, Cardi
it was a
B
journey.
And Ludacris and Shaq and like so many fun names. And so that was cool. I mean, I remember doing meetings in the headsets, right, with the Meta team to like previs stuff, which was wild. Yeah. So those are cool just in terms of like, I don't know. It's not often that you get to do new things. Yeah. I also think exposure was a really cool one for me, and I think it continues to be a great example and case study in the room. You know, people talk about like branded content and brands making shows, and it's like, well, we have this great example of this show that ran for 2 seasons and is on Hulu and YouTube.
Totally.
And like, was that Samsung was an incredible partner in creating a series that was entertaining but had was technically branded content.
There was a purpose to it. There was a story to it. It was done so well.
Yeah.
It's actually like the ultimate example of branded content.
I think so. I think we did a great job on it.
Well, 100%, but all that aside, just conceptually, right? Yeah. It's like there's no better plug for Samsung. And then, that was an amazing project. Well, tell us, like, is there anything that you're working on or anything that's coming up that you want to make sure we check out?
Yeah, I mean, we've got all the content coming out all the time, right? We've got Good Mythical Morning, Monday through Friday. On the Mythical Kitchen channel with Mythical Chef Josh, we have Last Meals, which is our interview series. We've got some awesome guests coming up. We've got some fun FYC stuff coming up, so making a push there.
Tell everyone what FYC is.
For your consideration for the short form category for the Emmys, which we're really excited about. So to be working with YouTube to kind of really champion creator content and push for recognition of what we're making as television, and should be considered in line with everyone else. And those are the big ones right now.
And where can we find you?
Find me at on LinkedIn. You can find me on social at JT Moncrief. And then Mythical is pretty much at Mythical or at Mythical Kitchen on all social platforms.
Incredible. And that's a wrap on another episode of Cultivated Conversations. Please check us out on social at Cultivated Entertainment on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm Jen Proctor on LinkedIn and all the things, and I want to hear from you. Send me your questions and your feedback. Our email is hello@cultivatedent.com. And until next time,